Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us here at CSS, and thanks for taking your time to be here. So we have some questions prepared for you, and I have a couple personal questions to ask you to start.
Okay.
So my first question is, what made you go into politics?
What made me go into politics? My family, my father and my mother were both heavily involved in both politics at a municipal, provincial level, as well as within their own organizations for work. And so that was always discussed around the dinner table, and then they've always had a strong give back to the community aspect as well in terms of volunteer groups, things like the symphony and the theater company and the auxiliary for the hospital, wildlife park, those types of boards in Kamloops. So I always saw that mix of politics and giving back to the community, and running for city council back in 2002 seemed like a good way to do that.
Awesome. Okay, and the second question, why did you choose to run for the Liberal Party?
Well, I'm a small business owner, and you know, when I looked at the various parties, and I've been asked to run both federally and provincially probably for at least the last 10-12 years that I've been an elected official, but I've never actually been asked to run for the NDP because I think that small business background lends itself obviously to more of the right of center side of politics. So when I looked at the platform that the BC Liberals ran on 4 years ago, and then when Terry Lake decided not to run again, you know, I had some conversations with Terry. We're very good friends, and it seemed like a very good fit in terms of still being able to try to affect change within our local communities, but bring that local voice to the provincial table to make sure priorities of Blue River and Clearwater and Barrier and Sun Peaks and Kamloops, that type of perspective gets put into the decision making in Victoria.
Awesome. Okay. Regardless of party policies, what can you do as our MLA to address the concerns of the younger generations in our riding?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. My youngest just graduated last year from high school, so you know, I have 3 kids that are either just finishing up or just starting their university journey, and have watched them grow up, you know, through sports and arts and those types of scenarios. But really, I think what is important for any elected official to do within our riding in particular is to continue to do things around support of education, both and recognizing the difference between the rural setting of education versus say the Kamloops setting, but also making sure that Thompson Rivers University is well supported, and things like the trades program gets expanded, things like the nursing program that we're expanding continue to happen, so that the youth in our area have a wide range of career choices. They have an accessible university that's close to home, and that they can still then get their training they need to be gainfully employed and live in the area of the world that they're growing up in and enjoying.
Awesome. Okay, my last personal question, it might be pretty similar to what you just touched on, but what is your party going to do to represent the interests of our generation?
That's, I think, the continued focus that the BC Liberals bring to the table that the other parties, frankly, aren't at this point. And our focus is really about making sure the economy is strong, making sure that there's good jobs for people to go to, and making sure that those training opportunities, so those employers have a well-trained workforce to hire, are in place. And I think if you concentrate on those big pieces of you know, public policy, then the others start to fall into place, because everyone agrees we need strong education, we need strong health care, we need strong senior supports, but you need a strong economy to be able to pay for that. And I think everyone's aware that you know, the saying is there's nothing's free in life, and that's very true when it comes to those very big ticket public policy ministries, and we need to make sure we have a very strong economy that people can be gainfully employed in and contributing back to those services.
Student questions. So our first question is from Mason.
Yeah. So your party is promising $1 billion tax cut to the middle class. How is that going to happen?
So the $1 billion is through the medical services premium, and what that essentially is because our economy has been performing so well, we essentially had an extra $1 billion of tax revenue based on last year's the way the economy was working. And so what we've committed to do is to remove that $1 billion of spending out of the system essentially and give it back to taxpayers. The reason we chose to cut the medical services premium in half, and that's how you get the $1 billion back in, is that affects households of $120,000 incomes and less. If we had just done a straight cut across the board, the average saving to a household would have been about $250. By doing it through the medical services premium and using that $120,000 income level, it actually results in a $900 savings to the households that earn $120,000 or less in a year. So much more significant tax break to the middle class by doing it that way.
Our next question from Corbin.
As the MLA for North Thompson, do you have any plans to create jobs in our area?
So within the BC Liberal platform, absolutely, and there's a big focus on rural BC, and we have a commitment in there in terms of broadband access to make sure by 2020 we have full broadband access to the remaining rural areas that don't have it currently. That will really help drive the newer economy that we're seeing out there, where people are trying to move, especially in Clearwater's case, move into Clearwater, work from home, be able to do a bit more of the online world within their workplace. So that will help diversify, as well as standing up for things like traditional industries like softwood lumber, mining, those types of resource industries as well. We're the only party that's fully supportive of those types of projects. When you look at the benefits that Kinder Morgan will bring to Clearwater, not just in the short term, but in the long term in terms of the property taxation that the district will be able to collect. It's about an extra $500,000 a year that would come to property taxation, which would keep all of your parents' property taxes lower by giving the district that money to be able to operate with.
Our next question from Savannah.
So in your platform, you say you're going to invest $90 million to keep childcare more affordable. And my question is, what are you going to invest in, and how is this going to translate into savings for families?
We have very big differences in terms of early childhood care in our platforms, the three parties. Ours is based on creating more spaces of childcare, partnering with the federal government, who's recently announced around 5,000 to 6,000 more childcare spaces in BC. We plan to add another 8,000 spaces, 5,000 in the very short term, and then another 3,000 over and above that. And that those will be a way to help offset costs as well at the same time. So we're trying to increase the supply as well as make sure that there's a cost offset for families that are most in need. And the difference between that and the $10 a day that you're hearing is two things. The NDP's $10 a day won't take effect for 10 years. So anyone that's 4 years old right now would be 14 by the time it's in effect. Plus it costs over $1.5 billion. And it's based on a Quebec model that has actually failed. And not only has it failed, Quebec also, you see the more affluent in the community being able to jump the line, about a 4-year wait for childcare. And Quebec also, I would point out, receives about $10 billion of what they call transfer payments from the federal government as a have-not province, is what they consider Quebec, whereas BC is considered a flourishing province. So we actually contribute money back to the other provinces, and part of that $10 billion comes from BC. So totally different scenarios. So that's why I'm comfortable with the BC Liberal plan to continue to increase spaces and help those that are truly in need in terms of those cost pressures versus just a blanket, everyone should get it regardless of what your income levels are.
Can I jump in? How does that money work? Like, because childcare, they're ran by private businesses, right? Mm-hmm. So how does the government get involved in helping with the funding?
So there's a couple different streams of how they do that. A lot of times it's based on the income means test that people have. So there can either be subsidized spaces, just as we have with, say, seniors care, where Interior Health Authority, and within even one seniors complex, some could be full market value. The senior that is well off pays the full price of that. And even within that complex, there might be 5 rooms that IHA will subsidize and cover off some of the costs of the person in there based on their income pays less than the other people would be. So childcare works so much in that same way in terms of that means test with what we're talking about.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, our next question from Emily.
So do you think that the cost of a post-secondary education in BC is an obstacle to training the workforce we need for a new economy?
I think for some it absolutely is, and that's why we need to continue to work on programs around student aid, around student loans, and the BC Liberals are committed to keeping the interest at prime, and making sure that the foundations within universities are well funded, so bursaries are there for students as well. And that's why it's critical to make sure we're supporting universities close to home, so like at Thompson Rivers University, to make it more affordable for kids to be able to stay close to home or at home or live with a family friend in a city close by, to really keep the cost of education down. I know in my own case I have two kids that are actively in university, one in California, one in Kamloops, and for both of them the cost of housing and food is actually more impactful to their budget on a monthly basis than the cost of tuition itself. And so we need to really make sure that we have those opportunities for kids as close as home as possible to really drive those costs down. And you know, at the end of the day, we need to make sure we have a well-funded university system that has a trade-off between tuition and government subsidy to make the cost within the range of affordability to make sure we have that well-trained workforce.
Okay. Are you aware of the issues with lobbying up in Clearwater? What can you do as an MLA to help resolve the conflicts?
Yes, so I'm aware. I assume you're talking about the CAN4 cut and the conflict around caribou habitat. Yeah. So yes, I'm aware of it. My understanding is that the process that had been gone through, and I know there's a lot of controversy as to you know, some of the information that was used and whether it was accurate or not. But my understanding is that it's you know, it's not old growth that's being cut. It's dead wood that's being cut and harvested out that will be replanted. The park itself, obviously, it's illegal to have any logging happening inside of the park. I think everyone wants to make sure Wells Great Park stays untouched in terms of especially commercial logging practices. You know, in truth, there's very little at this stage that any MLA of any party would be able to interject and suddenly put a brake on the process that's unfolded to this point. I think the key moving forward is to make sure that the logging is done to the standard that it's supposed to be done to, the reforestation happens as quickly as possible, and that the caribou habitat that everyone has concerns around truly isn't impacted, and that needs to be watched as the logging is happening. It's like almost any resource extraction anywhere. You have to make sure that you're balancing the environmental view, making sure that the permitting and the requirements in place are being met and the impacts aren't happening. And you have to balance that off with the local jobs. You know, it wasn't that long ago that CAN4 had to shut the Vavenby mill down. We know of about 175 people in the valley working at the Vavenby mill again, that it's restarted. And the reality is that mill lives or dies based on access to fiber supply that's close to the mill. The economics of bringing the fiber from a long distance to that mill just don't work. And so it's always trying to find that trade-off between keeping people regionally gainfully employed while making sure that the environment has as minimal damage as possible, as well as the wildlife is managed properly and doesn't have the impact that people have fears around.